My name is Harper Myers. I'm 36 years old. 20 years ago, my parents kicked me out of the house for getting pregnant in 10th grade. 16 years old. The November rain in Portland doesn't just fall, it seeps into your bones. A relentless gray mist that blurs the line between the sky and the asphalt. One suitcase. My mother pointing at the door, telling me I was dead to them. That same night, they signed papers erasing me from the family, me and any child I might ever have. I kept those papers. I kept everything. For 2 decades, I was invisible. They told everyone I'd moved to a boarding school in Switzerland, then later to a prestigious firm in London, building their spotless reputation on the grave of the daughter they threw away. Then last week, they showed up at my door, desperate, smiling, demanding to meet their grandson, a grandson they'd bragged about for months to 200 of their most powerful friends at the Multnomah Athletic Club. They offered me $250,000, a check cut from the same account that funded my father's golf memberships and my mother's charity galas. They had no idea that the grandson they'd been promising everyone didn't exist, and what they found instead would tear apart everything they'd spent 50 years building. Portland, Oregon, November 2004. The air was a crisp 42 degrees Fahrenheit. I was 16, a sophomore at St. Jude's Preparatory Academy, and the youngest child of Grant and Victoria Myers. On paper, we were the perfect Pacific Northwest family. My father owned a successful real estate law practice downtown, Myers and Associates, established 1987. My mother had been president of the Junior League and the PTA for 4 consecutive years. We sat in the front pew at Grace Fellowship Church every Sunday, dressed in coordinated outfits my mother selected each Saturday night from Nordstrom. But every family has its hierarchy, and I learned mine early. Jax, my older brother, was 22 and in his 3rd year of dental school at OHSU. He was the pride of the family, the son who would carry on the Myers name and the legacy of impeccable credit scores. Sloan, 20, was studying to become a teacher at U of O. The beautiful daughter who never questioned anything, the one who wore pearls to breakfast and smiled when she was told. And then there was me. I was what my mother once called the surprise. Born when she was 34, 6 years after she thought she was done having children. I don't think she ever forgave me for disrupting her plans, for being the unexpected variable in her carefully curated life. The signs were subtle, but constant. Family photos displayed prominently in the living room somehow never included my school portraits. The walls were covered in Jax's lacrosse trophies and Sloane's ballet recitals, leaving no room for my existence. Dinner conversations revolved around Jax's clinical rotations or Sloane's sorority events. When I mentioned making the honor roll, my father would nod and say, "That's nice, Harper," before turning back to Jax to discuss property taxes. I learned to make myself small, to not ask for too much, to not need too much. My father had a saying he repeated at every family gathering while sipping his 18-year-old scotch. Reputation takes 20 years to build and 5 minutes to destroy. I didn't understand then how prophetic those words would become, or that I would be the 5 minutes he feared. I met Caleb Webb at the Central Library downtown. It was a cathedral of books, a place where the scent of old paper drowned out the suffocating smell of my mother's expensive perfume. The library was sanctuary, a place where no one compared me to my siblings or reminded me of expectations I could never meet. I went there 3 afternoons a week, ostensibly to study, really, just to breathe. Caleb attended Jefferson High, a public school my parents considered a breeding ground for failure. He was 17, worked part-time at his uncle's auto repair shop, and had the kindest eyes I'd ever seen. He smelled like motor oil and peppermint, a combination that felt more like home than my own bedroom. He found me crying in the biography section one October afternoon, after my mother had forgotten to pick me up from school for the 3rd time that month. "Hey," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "You okay?" No one had asked me that in a very long time. Not without an agenda, anyway. We dated secretly for 2 months. We spent our afternoons in his beat-up Ford F-150, talking about dreams that didn't involve law degrees or country clubs. He was gentle and patient and made me feel like I mattered, like I was someone worth remembering. October 28th, 2004. I'll never forget staring at that pregnancy test in the bathroom of a Chevron station 3 miles from the country club. 2 pink lines. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The fluorescent light overhead flickered, casting a sickly yellow glow on my terror. When I told Caleb, he didn't run. He didn't make excuses. He held my hands and said, "We'll figure this out together, Harper. You're not alone." I wanted to believe him. Part of me did. But I knew my parents. I knew what mattered to them. And I knew that when I told them, their first question wouldn't be, "Are you okay?" It would be, "What will the neighbors think?" I decided to tell them at Sunday dinner. I didn't know it would be the last meal I'd ever eat in that house. Sunday, November 14th, 2004, 7:32 p.m. The roast beef was overcooked and smelled of rosemary and disappointment. I remember that detail because I was staring at it, trying to find the courage to speak, while my father complains about a property dispute in Lake Oswego, and my mother calculated which families would attend the church Christmas gala. "I have something to tell you." The table went quiet. 4 faces turned toward me. My parents, Jack's home for the weekend, Sloan visiting from college. I was 8 weeks pregnant, and I couldn't hide it much longer. "I'm pregnant." My mother's silver fork clattered against her fine china. My father didn't move. "Who is the father?" His voice was ice. "Is it someone from St. Jude's? Someone we know?" "His name is Caleb Webb. He goes to Jefferson High. He works at his uncle's shop." My mother's face had gone pale, her skin matching the white linen tablecloth. "You've been seeing a boy from a public school?" "He's a good person, Mom. Does he come from a good family?" My father cut in. "What does his father do?" "He lives with his uncle. He works at an auto shop." The silence that followed lasted exactly 11 seconds. I counted. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked like a metronome for a funeral. Then my father stood. "You will not keep it." "Grant," my mother started. "She will not destroy everything we've built." He looked at me like I was a stranger, like I was a stain on a custom-made suit. "If you keep that baby, you are no longer part of this family." By 9:15 p.m., I was standing on the front porch with one suitcase, rain soaking through my wool sweater. My mother had opened the door and pointed outside. Not my father, my mother. Her eyes were hard, focused on the social suicide I had committed. Jackson Sloan watched from the upstairs window. Neither of them came down. They stayed in the warmth, protecting their own futures. I called Caleb from a payphone at the gas station on Burnside Street. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. He picked up on the second ring. "Harper, what's wrong?" "They kicked me out." 20 minutes later, his uncle's truck pulled up to the gas station. Caleb jumped out before it fully stopped, wrapped me in his flannel jacket, and held me while I sobbed against his chest. "I've got you," he said. "I've got you." We didn't have a plan. We had $300 between us, a truck with questionable brakes, and nowhere to go. That's when Maggie Sullivan saved my life. She was our neighbor, 3 houses down from the Myers estate, 62 years old, a retired literature teacher who preferred her garden to the neighborhood gossip circles. She'd seen me standing in the rain from her window. She'd watched long enough to understand the cruelty of a perfect reputation. "You can stay with me," she said when I knocked on her door at nearly 10 o'clock at night. "As long as you need." 2 weeks. That's how long we stayed in Mrs. Sullivan's guest room before Caleb found us a studio apartment in Seattle. $425 a month above a laundromat in Capitol Hill that smelled like bleach and secondhand hope. My parents had their lawyer draw up papers the night they threw me out. I know because my father mailed me a copy 3 days later. Certified mail, signature required, like I was a business transaction. The document stated that Harper Elizabeth Myers forfeited all inheritance rights, and the Myers family bore no legal or moral obligation to her or any child born to her. I kept that paper. I've kept it for 20 years. It was the only birth certificate my parents ever gave my daughter. Skylar Sky Myers was born on July 6, 2005, at Harborview Medical Center in Seattle. The hospital room overlooked the gray expanse of Elliott Bay, the ferry whistles sounding like a mournful choir in the distance. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, 10 fingers, 10 toes. She had her father's deep brown eyes and my stubborn, square-set chin. When the nurse handed her to me, she didn't just cry. She screamed with a primal force that vibrated through my chest. I held her close and whispered against her damp forehead, "Good, Sky. Scream. Make them hear you. Don't ever let anyone in this world make you feel small." Our first home was a 4th-floor walk-up in Capitol Hill, right above a 24-hour laundromat. The air in our studio always carried a heavy, humid scent of industrial detergent and the metallic tang of old pipes. It was $425 a month, a fortune to us then, and the windows rattled every time a heavy truck rumbled down the street. My parents had their lawyer draw up the final papers the very night they threw me out. I know because my father mailed me the official copy 3 days later. Certified mail, signature required, as if he were terminating a lease on a failed investment. The document stated that Harper Elizabeth Myers forfeited all inheritance rights, and the Myers family bore no legal or moral obligation to her or any child born to her. The legal jargon was cold, precise, and absolute. A surgical removal of a daughter from a family tree. I kept that paper in a plastic sleeve, tucked under the mattress of Sky's second-hand crib. I've kept it for 20 years. It was the only thing my father ever gave his granddaughter, a legal guarantee of her invisibility. The first 5 years were a blur of pure survival. Caleb worked double shifts at an auto repair shop in Ballard, his fingernails permanently stained with grease and his back aching from leaning over the engines of cars we could never afford to own. While he worked, I finished my GED at a community center, then started taking night classes at Seattle Central, 2 at a time. I studied by the light of a flickering floor lamp while Sky slept, the smell of cheap ramen noodles and stale coffee becoming the soundtrack of my education. We lived on the edge of the blade. We hunted for the day-old bins at the Safeway down the street, filling our freezer with discounted bread and bruised fruit. I learned to sew patches onto patches, turning Sky's outgrown leggings into headbands and doll clothes to make every dollar stretch until it begged for mercy. I remember the feeling of counting quarters at the checkout line, my heart racing, praying the total wouldn't exceed the $4.75 I had left in my pocket. I sent my parents a birth announcement when Sky was born. No response. I thought maybe a photo of a newborn would crack the ice around Victoria's heart. I sent another photo on her first birthday. Sky covered in chocolate cake, grinning with her 2 front teeth. Silence. By her second birthday, after another manila envelope was returned to me marked "refused by addressee," I stopped trying. I realized then that to Grant and Victoria Myers, I wasn't just gone. I was a ghost they had successfully exorcised. Caleb and I never got married. We kept saying we would someday, when we had enough for a real wedding, something with a white dress and a cake that didn't come from a grocery store box. When life calmed down, someday kept getting pushed back by car repairs, utility bills, and preschool tuitions. Then, on March 15th, 2010, the somedays ran out. A freak late winter storm had turned Aurora Avenue into a slick black mirror. A delivery truck ran a red light at 50 miles per hour. Caleb was driving home from a grueling night shift, probably thinking about the coffee I'd have waiting for him. The police officer who came to my door didn't have to say much. His hat was off, his eyes were down, and the rain was dripping off his yellow slicker onto my linoleum floor. He said Caleb died on impact. He was only 26 years old. Sky was 4. The life insurance policy Caleb had through the shop paid out $12,000. That was the price the world put on the life of a good man who worked 60 hours a week to keep his family fed. $12,000 for 26 years of laughter, dreams, and the way he used to tuck Sky's hair behind her ears. I was 22 years old, a single mother with a 4-year-old daughter, $12,000 in a checking account, and absolutely no one to call. The silence in that studio apartment was louder than the laundromat below ever was. I could have given up then. I could have crawled back to Portland, stood on that rain-soaked porch again, and begged for a seat at the table I'd been kicked away from. I didn't. I'd started doing small interior design projects while Caleb was alive, mostly helping neighbors in our building stage their cramped apartments or picking out paint colors for local real estate agents who didn't want to pay for a firm. I had an eye for it, people said. I could see the soul of a room, the way light could hide the cracks in the plaster, or how a well-placed rug could make a basement feel like a sanctuary. After Caleb died, I threw myself into that work like my life depended on it, because it did. I spent my days at the design library and my nights sketching floor plans on the back of Sky's drawing paper. In 2012, I met Eleanor Vance at a design workshop at Seattle Central College. She was 52, recently retired as the creative director of one of the top-tier firms in the city, and looking for a project. She was a woman of sharp angles and sharper wit, dressed in impeccable charcoal linens and wearing glasses that cost more than my first car. For reasons I still don't fully understand, she chose me. "You have talent," she said, after reviewing my portfolio, which was mostly photos I'd taken with a cheap digital camera. Raw, unpolished, but real. You understand how people actually live, not just how they want to look. Let me help you shape it. Under Eleanor's wing, I stopped being a girl trying to survive and started becoming a woman with a vision. With Eleanor's mentorship and a $50,000 SBA loan that took me 3 attempts and 100 sleepless nights to secure, I founded Hearth Home Interiors. Our first office was a converted closet in a shared workspace in South Lake Union, surrounded by tech startups and the constant hum of construction. By 2018, I had 8 employees and annual revenue of $1.2 million. I wasn't just paying the bills anymore. I was building a legacy. In 2022, Seattle Met Magazine ran a feature story on me. From teen mom to design CEO, the Harper Myers story. The journalist spent 3 days interviewing me about my journey. I told her about the pregnancy at 16, being cut off from my family, losing Caleb, and building a business from the dust. I told her everything except my parents' names. I didn't omit them to protect their reputation. I did it to deny them the satisfaction of being part of my narrative. I wanted to protect Sky from anyone who might try to connect her to people who never wanted her to exist. To the world, I was a self-made success. To my parents, I was still the 16-year-old error they had erased. By 2024, Hearth Home had 22 employees and revenue of $4.2 million. I moved into a corner office overlooking Capitol Hill, the very neighborhood where I once counted pennies for laundry. My daughter was 19, a sophomore at the University of Washington majoring in psychology. She was brilliant, fierce, and everything I'd hoped she would become. 20 years. No contact. No phone calls on birthdays. No cards at Christmas. No sign that Grant and Victoria Myers were anything more than a bad dream I'd had a long time ago. Until last week. Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. 6:47 p.m. The ghosts finally decided to come home. 20 years. No contact from the Myers family until last week. Tuesday, November 5th, 2024, 6:47 p.m. The Pacific Northwest sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving the Seattle sky a bruised shade of violet. I had just gotten home from a final walkthrough on a Mercer Island waterfront estate, a renovation project worth $800,000 that had occupied every waking hour of my last 6 months. My mind was still racing, vibrating with fabric samples, automated lighting systems, and the logistics of shipping Italian marble across the Sound. When I turned onto my street and saw the car, a black Mercedes-Benz S-Class with Oregon plates idling at the curb, the air in my lungs turned to lead. I parked in my driveway and sat there for a full minute, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so hard the leather groaned. Through the windshield, I watched 2 figures standing at my front door, like statues of a past I thought I'd buried. The man had gray hair now. His shoulders stooped under the weight of a charcoal cashmere overcoat. The woman still held herself with that rigid, terrifying posture, a constant vigilance against any speck of dust that might disturb her carefully constructed social standing. Grant and Victoria Myers, my parents. I hadn't seen them in 20 years. They looked like ghosts from a different century, out of place in the vibrant modern life I'd carved for myself in the shadow of the Space Needle. I considered putting the car in reverse, driving to a hotel in Bellevue, and calling Sky to tell her to stay at her dorm. But I was 36 years old. I owned a company. I had built a life without a single penny of their blood money. I would not run. I got out of my car and walked toward them, the click of my heels on the driveway sounding like a countdown. My father spoke first. "Harper, you look..." He paused, his eyes scanning me with the same clinical precision he used to evaluate a property for foreclosure. He took in my designer coat, my leather briefcase, and the architectural lines of my house. "Well, you've clearly done better than expected." "What are you doing here?" My voice was flat, devoid of the tremor I felt in my chest. My mother stepped forward. Her face had more lines now, her skin pulled tight by expensive procedures, and her hair was a careful shade of ash blonde that didn't quite match her age. "We know about your son, Harper. We know you have a son." I stared at her, the absurdity of the statement ringing in my ears like a physical blow. "We'd like to meet him," my father added, his voice regaining that authoritative courtroom tone. "We'd like to reconnect as a family, to bridge the gap." The sheer audacity of it nearly made me laugh out loud. 20 years of silence. 20 years of pretending I was a mistake they'd successfully erased from their tax returns. And now they were standing on my porch, asking to meet a grandson they'd never bothered to acknowledge. A grandson who didn't even exist. I let them into my house. I still don't know if it was out of curiosity or a lingering, deep-seated need to witness their delusion firsthand. My father sat in my living room like he was evaluating a corporate acquisition, assessing the wide plank oak floors, the custom built-in shelves I designed myself, and the original Pacific Northwest art on the walls. My mother perched on the edge of my sofa, her hands folded over her Hermes bag, her spine as straight as a ruler. "Your anniversary," I said, leaning against the kitchen island. "That's why you're here. 50 years, the golden jubilee." My father almost smiled, a thin, practiced movement of the lips. "November 15th. We're hosting a celebration at the Heathman Hotel in Portland. 200 guests. The mayor will be there, Senator Harrison, the board of the Rotary Club." "What does that have to do with me?" My mother exchanged a glance with my father, that silent, coded communication they'd used my entire childhood to decide my fate. "There have been questions, Harper, about you, about what happened 20 years ago. People talk," my father added. "Some of the older families in the Heights remember we had a third child. They've asked where you are, why you were never at the country club events." "We've always said you moved away, that you were working in Europe, building a career in international design. But lately, since that magazine article came out, the questions have become more persistent." "So you need me to make an appearance," I said, the bitterness coating my tongue like copper. "Show everyone that the Myers family is whole and happy. Perform a little miracle for the Portland elite." "We need your son," My mother's voice was firm, undercut by a desperate kind of social hunger. We've told people about him, about our brilliant grandson. He should be there representing the next generation of the Myers legacy. He's the missing piece of the puzzle. The room went very still. The only sound was the hum of my high-end refrigerator and the blood rushing in my ears. Who told you I have a son? We read that article in Seattle Met. My father waved his hand dismissively, as if facts were just minor inconveniences. The piece mentioned your child, your successful business. It said you had a young adult following in your footsteps. We assumed, well, naturally, a successor would be a son. They hadn't even read the article carefully. They'd skimmed it, saw the word child and the word success, and their biased, old-world brains had filled in the rest with a male heir. And if I refuse? My father's jaw tightened. Let's not make this difficult, Harper. He reached into his leather briefcase and withdrew a check. The sight of it made my stomach turn. We're prepared to compensate you for your time and discretion, he said, placing it on my coffee table with the practiced grace of a man settling a lawsuit. $250,000. You bring your son to the party, stay for 3 hours, take some family photos, then you can return to your life in Seattle. Consider it a consulting fee. I looked at the check, then at my mother, who was nodding as if this were the most reasonable proposition in the world. $250,000? I repeated. Is that the current market rate for 20 years of abandonment? We're also prepared to reinstate you in the family trust. My mother leaned forward, her perfume, something cloying and floral, filling the space between us. The combined estate is valued at $3.8 million. You would have an equal share with Jackson Sloan. I thought about that studio apartment above the laundromat. The nights I'd worked double shifts at a diner, while Sky slept in a playpen in the back because I couldn't afford a sitter. The years I'd spent building Hearth Home from nothing while they sat in their Portland Heights mansion, pretending I'd never existed. And if I say no? My father's expression hardened, the loving parent mask slipping to reveal the ruthless litigator beneath. We would prefer not to involve your son directly, Harper, but if necessary, we can reach out to him ourselves. He's an adult, isn't it? We can find him, explain the situation, help him understand the inheritance he's missing out on. It was a threat. Cold, calculated, and quintessentially Grant Myers. You want to contact my child, I said slowly, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, and tell them your version of the truth. We want to be a family again. My mother spread her hands, the picture of polished sincerity. Isn't that what you've always wanted? I was about to answer, about to tell them exactly where they could shove their check and their trust fund, when I heard footsteps on the stairs, and everything changed. Mom? Is everything okay? I heard voices. Sky stopped at the bottom of the stairs, her Psychology 101 textbook tucked under her arm. She was wearing UW sweatpants and an oversized hoodie, her dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She looked exactly like what she was, a 19-year-old college student who'd been studying in her room, blissfully unaware that the people who had tried to erase her were sitting in our living room. My mother rose to her feet, her face cycling through confusion, calculation, and something close to horror. "Who is this?" "This is Skylar." I stood, positioning myself slightly between my daughter and the predators on my sofa. "My daughter. Your granddaughter." "Daughter?" My father's voice cracked, the first time I'd ever heard him lose his composure. "But the article, we were told, it said—" "The article said child, Grant. You assumed the rest. You saw what you wanted to see, just like you've done for 20 years. Sky's gaze moved from me to the strangers in our living room, her sharp psychological mind already connecting the dots. Understanding dawned in her eyes, a cold, clear light that mirrored my own. "These are them," she said, her voice steady. "The grandparents who threw you out in the rain when you were pregnant with me?" My mother flinched, her champagne silk poise crumbling. "That's not. It was more complicated then." "Which part was complicated?" Sky crossed her arms, stepping fully into the light. "The part where you kicked a 16-year-old out in a storm? Or the part where you spent 2 decades pretending she was dead?" "Young lady," my father started, his face reddening. "I'm not your young lady. I'm the grandchild you never wanted to meet. The one you tried to make disappear before I even took my first breath. I know everything. Mom never hid it from me. I know about the notarized letter. I know about the moral obligation clause." My parents sat in stunned silence, trapped in a modern living room by the very reality they'd tried to litigate out of existence. Sky looked at me, then back at them with a smile that was all Myers, sharp, brilliant, and utterly lethal. "They came here for a grandson, didn't they? Someone they could show off at the Heathman." "Yes," I said. Sky turned back to them. "Surprise!" "I think you should leave." I stood my ground, my voice echoing in the minimalist expanse of my living room. Grant recovered faster than Victoria, his legal mind already recalibrating, shifting variables like a grandmaster at a chessboard. "We'll consider what you've said, Harper, but not tonight. Not with Sky here." Victoria rose, gathering her handbag with trembling fingers. At the door, she turned back, her eyes searching mine for a flicker of the 16-year-old girl she used to command. "This is an opportunity to heal, Harper, to put the past behind us. Don't let old wounds cost you your future." I watched them walk to their Mercedes, watched my father help my mother into the passenger seat with the same practiced, hollow gallantry he had used for 4 decades. When the car disappeared around the corner of the rain-slicked street, Sky spoke. "You're not actually considering this, are you?" I looked at my daughter, this fierce, brilliant young woman I'd raised alone on a diet of grit and Seattle coffee. The person Grant and Victoria Myers had tried to erase from existence before she was even born. "No," I said, my voice hardening like tempered steel. "But I'm not done with them yet." That night, after Sky went to bed, I pulled the fireproof lockbox from the back of my closet. I hadn't opened it in years. It felt heavy, a physical weight of 2 decades of silence. Inside were the documents of my erasure. The notarized letter of disinheritance dated November 14th, 2004, signed by Grant Allen Myers and Victoria Elizabeth Myers, witnessed by a notary named Harold Brennan. I remembered the day my father mailed it to me, certified mail, requiring my signature, as if he wanted to make sure I knew exactly how thorough he'd been in cutting the cord. The document was 3 pages, dense with the kind of legal language designed to be airtight, a contractual death sentence. It ensured that Harper Elizabeth Myers hereby forfeited all claims to the Myers family estate, and that the family bore no legal or moral obligation to the aforementioned party, or any dependents thereof. Any dependents thereof. Skye, reduced to 3 cold words in a legal document, erased before she took her first breath. I photographed each page with my phone, uploaded them to my cloud storage, and made encrypted backup copies. Mom? I looked up. Skye was standing in my doorway, her silhouette framed by the hallway light. I couldn't sleep either. She sat beside me on the bed, looking at the document spread across my charcoal comforter. Is that the letter? Yes. She picked up the first page, reading slowly. When she finished, her eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall, a trait she definitely got from me. They really did it, she whispered. They really just cut you out, like you were a bad investment. They did. What are you going to do with these? I looked at the evidence of 20 years of calculated cruelty. I don't know yet, I admitted. But whatever I do, they won't be able to hide behind their perfect family narrative anymore. Skye nodded slowly, a devious, brilliant glint appearing in her eyes. I might have an idea. Something that hits them where they live. Their reputation. The next morning, I made a call I hadn't made in over a year. Maggie Sullivan answered on the 3rd ring. Harper, is that you, sweetheart? Maggie? I smiled despite everything. I hope I'm not calling too early. At my age, early is relative. What's wrong? You sound like you've got the weight of the Cascades on your shoulders. I told her about my parents' visit, about the grandson they'd invented, the anniversary party, and the $250,000. When I finished, the line was quiet for a long moment. Those people, she finally said. 20 years, and they haven't changed a single soul-crushing habit. Maggie, I need to ask you something. That night, November 14th, 2004. I remember it like it was yesterday. Her voice hardened. I watched from my window, saw you standing in the rain, that little Samsonite suitcase at your feet, watched your parents' car drive away. I should have walked across the street sooner. I've regretted that every single day. Do you still have your security camera footage from back then? Old teachers never delete anything, Harper. It's a habit. Document everything. Let me check my digital archives. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A grainy but unmistakable image. A 16-year-old girl standing on a porch in the rain. 9:17 p.m., November 14th, 2004. The timestamp was a digital scar in the corner. That's you, Maggie said when I called her back. That's the night they threw you away. Would you be willing to verify this officially, Maggie? Honey, I've been waiting 20 years for someone to ask. Whatever you need, I'm on the next Amtrak to Portland. I spent that evening rereading my own story. The Seattle Met article was still available online, shared over 12,000 times. The journalist, Rebecca Wong, had titled it, "From Teen Mom to Design CEO, The Harper Myers Story." I'd been careful in that interview. I'd told the truth, but not the whole truth. Now I scrolled through the comments. One caught my eye, posted just 2 weeks ago. "Does anyone know if she's related to the Myers law firm in Portland? Someone in my church mentioned it, and now I'm curious." So that's how the leak started. A whisper in a church pew. Thursday, November 7th, 2024, 3:42 p.m. My phone showed an Oregon area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. "Harper, it's Jax." I hadn't heard my brother's voice in 20 years. It was deeper now, weathered. The voice of a man in his 40s instead of the 22-year-old who'd watched from an upstairs window. "Jax, I know I have no right to call." He exhaled shakily. "But I need you to know some things before whatever happens next." "Then talk." "The grandson story. The whole thing about you having a son, that came from Mom. She read the article 2 years ago, but she didn't read it carefully. She saw successful child and CEO, and her brain just built this whole fantasy about a male heir continuing the Myers legacy. She invented a grandson to tell her friends at the Multnomah Club." Jax's voice cracked. "Dad went along with it. They've been dining out on your imaginary son for months, Harper. He's become a myth in Portland society." I closed my eyes. The capacity for self-delusion in that house was staggering. "Why are you telling me this now, Jax?" "Because I was a coward. 20 years ago, I should have come downstairs. I should have grabbed that suitcase and told them they were wrong." He stopped, breathing hard. "Sloan and I have talked about it for years. We were wrong. And now, I want to make it right. The anniversary party at the Heathman, Sloan and I will be there. If you decide to show up, you won't be standing alone." I didn't know what to say. Jax talked for another hour about the unwritten rules of being a Myers child, the constant performance, the way our parents wielded approval like a weapon. "There's something else," Jax added. "The party, there's going to be a family moment that gets live-streamed on the Grace Fellowship Facebook page. Pastor Harrison's idea, a show of unity." A live stream. 200 witnesses in person and thousands more online. The perfect stage for a performance. Friday, November 8th, 2024, 10:14 a.m. My father called directly, no preamble. "Harper, we're running out of time. The party is in 1 week. $250,000 and full reinstatement. Final offer." "I've been talking to Jax, Grant." Silence. "He told me about the grandson story, the one you made up." "That's not... We may have embellished slightly." "You invented an entire person, a prop for your social standing." My father's voice hardened. "I don't appreciate your tone. After everything we're offering..." "What are you offering, Grant? Money to buy my silence? A spot in a trust you use to erase me? You're not offering anything. You're trying to buy your way out of a lie you created." "If you don't come to this party, Harper, you will never have another opportunity to be part of this family. I built a better life without you than I ever would have had with you," I replied, and hung up. That evening, I sat at my dining table with Skye and Eleanor Vance. "They want a performance," Eleanor said, swirling her Pinot Noir. "They want you to validate 20 years of lies." "They want to use you, Mom," Skye added, "the same way they've always used people." I looked at both of them, the family I had built for myself. "I'm going to that party." Skye's head snapped up. "Mom, not to give them what they want, to give myself what I need. They've spent 20 years controlling my story. It's time I took the mic." I showed them the photos of the disinheritance letter, Maggie's footage, and the Seattle Met article. "I want to tell the truth in front of everyone who matters to them, on their stage, during their precious live stream. Not for revenge, but to stop being invisible." "I'm coming with you." Skye's voice was firm. "They need to see who I really am, not their imaginary grandson, me." I called Jax that night. "Your offer to stand with me, does it still hold?" "Sloan and I are ready." "Then don't warn them. Don't tell them I'm coming. We're going to give them the reunion they deserve." I looked out at the Seattle skyline, at the life I'd built from nothing. Because in 1 week, we were going to show the Portland elite what family actually means. Saturday, November 15th, 2024, 6:47 p.m. The Crystal Ballroom at the Heathman Hotel was a masterpiece of old-world Portland prestige, the kind of place where the walls whispered of timber fortunes and closed-door political deals. Chandeliers dripping in baccarat crystal cast a soft, forgiving glow over the 200 guests in black tie attire. The air was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and the sharp, metallic tang of vintage Bollinger champagne. I stood in the arched entrance with Skye beside me. She wore a navy blue dress, simple and elegant, a stark contrast to the overdressed socialites in the room. I'd chosen black, a tailored, high-fashion power suit that screamed Seattle Tech CEO rather than estranged daughter. It was professional, understated, and utterly impossible to ignore. "You okay?" she whispered, her fingers lightly brushing the fabric of my sleeve. "I'm about to crash my parents' 50th anniversary gala to tell the most powerful people in Oregon that they've been living a lie for 2 decades. I squeezed her hand, my palm damp. "I'm terrified." "That's not what I asked," she said, looking at me with eyes that had seen the struggle of a studio apartment and the glory of a corner office. "Yeah," I said, my voice finding its center. "I'm okay." We walked in. The room was arranged around a raised platform at the far end where my parents would give their speeches. A professional camera crew from a local production house was setting up the live stream for the Grace Fellowship Church's global mission page. I could see the iPad monitor near the stage, the Facebook Live indicator already blinking red. And there they were, Grant and Victoria Myers, standing on that stage like royalty, surrounded by well-wishers, including a few Nike executives and local court judges. My mother was in champagne-colored silk, her neck draped in a string of pearls that probably cost as much as my first house. My father was in a tailored navy suit, both of them glowing with the toxic confidence of people who believed they'd successfully rewritten history. They hadn't noticed us yet. The room was too crowded, the attention too focused on the golden couple. But as we moved through the crowd, heads began to turn. The socialites who had read the Seattle Met article recognized me. Someone near the door whispered, "Is that the woman from the magazine? The one in the feature?" The whispers spread like ripples in a pond. And then my mother looked up. My father had just begun his speech. 50 years of marriage has taught me that family is everything. Victoria and I have built our lives around that principle. Our children, our community, our faith. His voice carried across the ballroom, amplified by a state-of-the-art Bose system, captured by the live stream camera for 1,000 viewers online. 200 faces watched adoringly, I noted, noticing the scroll of comments on the small monitor. Beautiful couple. God bless the Myers family. What an inspiration to us all. Victoria saw me first. Her champagne smile froze, her face turning the color of ash. I watched her hand tighten on my father's arm, her nails probably sinking into his suit. He followed her gaze and stopped mid-sentence. The silence that followed was heavy, a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room. Someone near the back said, "That's Grant's youngest. I thought she was in London." My father recovered first, his legal training kicking in. As I was saying, family has always... I started walking toward the stage. The crowd parted, not like a movie, but with a cautious, awkward shuffling of feet. Skye walked beside me, her chin high, her steps as steady as a heartbeat. Jax appeared at the edge of the crowd, Sloane beside him. They didn't move to block me. They simply stood there, witnesses to the inevitable. "Harper!" My father's voice came through the speakers now, the frequency clipping as his breath hitched. "What a surprise! We weren't expecting..." I climbed the 3 steps to the platform. The live stream camera operator, sensing a viral moment, tracked my movement with surgical precision. I could feel 200 pairs of eyes on me, plus however many were watching on Facebook and YouTube. "Hello, Dad." I took the microphone from his hand before he could react. "Hello, everyone. My name is Harper Myers." I paused, letting the name hang in the air like a gavel. "For those of you who don't know me, and many of you don't, I'm Grant and Victoria's youngest daughter, the one they told you went to Europe 20 years ago." The silence in that ballroom was absolute. I could hear the hum of the HVAC system. "I didn't go to Europe," I continued, my voice projected to the back of the hall. "On November 14th, 2004, 20 years ago tomorrow, my parents discovered I was pregnant at 16. That same night, they threw me out of their house. They had their lawyer draft papers disowning me. They told me I was dead to them." Someone gasped. A prominent judge's wife covered her mouth. The live stream comments were exploding. I could see the text scrolling faster than the eye could follow. "They told everyone I'd gone abroad. For 20 years, they pretended I didn't exist. To them, I was a clerical error." I reached into my bag and pulled out the notarized letter. "This is the document my father mailed me 3 days after throwing me out. It states that I forfeit all inheritance rights and that the Myers family has no obligation to me or any dependents thereof." I held it up to the camera, close enough for the 4K lens to capture the signatures. "Those dependents? That's my daughter, Skye." I gestured to where she stood. "Your granddaughter, whom you've never met. The grandson you've been bragging about to your friends at the Multnomah Club doesn't exist. You invented him based on a magazine article you didn't even bother to read carefully. My father grabbed for the microphone. Harper, this isn't the place. When is the place, Grant? I held the mic out of his reach, my height advantage on the heels making me look like the giant he used to be. When is the right time to tell the truth? You came to my house last week offering me $250,000 to parade a fictional grandson at this party. $250,000 to buy your way out of a lie. I turned to the crowd, to the camera, to the 200 witnesses. I didn't come here for money. I came here because I'm done being erased. I am done being the secret you hide in the basement of your reputation. Pastor Harrison stepped forward, his brow furrowed in genuine distress. Grant, is this true? My father couldn't answer. My mother started crying. Not the quiet, dignified cry of a victim, but the messy, mascara-ruining sob of a woman whose social shield had just shattered. Grant. Pastor Harrison's voice was firm, the tone he used for excommunication. I asked you a question. Is what your daughter saying true? The room held its breath. I watched my father calculate, looking at the mayor, the Rotary Board, the church elders. He tried to find a spin, a legal loophole. But in the age of live streams and notarized evidence, there was nowhere to hide. It was a difficult time, he finally said, his voice small. We made decisions. You threw me out because I was pregnant, I cut in. Because your prestige mattered more than your child. Jack stepped onto the stage, then Sloane. They stood beside me. She's telling the truth, Jack said, his voice carrying through the room without the need for a mic. Sloane and I were there. We watched from the window while they put a 16-year-old girl out in the rain. We stayed silent for 20 years. That was our sin. The whispers became a roar. People were pulling out phones, the video already being uploaded to TikTok and Twitter. Mayor Simmons was already moving toward the exit, his security detail clearing a path. Maggie Sullivan, I said, pointing to the back row. Maggie stood, her chin lifted. I watched that child stand in the rain for 10 minutes before she walked away. I gave her a place to sleep. The Myers family never once called to see if she was alive. I handed the microphone back to my father. I didn't come here to destroy you, I said, the coldness in my heart finally beginning to thaw. I came here to stop being invisible. I turned back to the crowd. Today, I own a design company in Seattle with 22 employees and over $4 million in annual revenue. My daughter is a sophomore at the University of Washington. We built our lives without the Myers family. Success wasn't my revenge. Success was my answer. Sky climbed onto the stage and took my hand. I'm Sky, she said. The granddaughter you never wanted. You could have known me. You could have been at my birthday parties or my graduation. You chose your social standing instead. And now, you don't get to pretend that was our fault. We walked off the stage. Behind us, The crystal ballroom erupted into the kind of chaos that usually follows a corporate collapse. At the door, I turned back one last time. I'm not going to sue you. I'm keeping the disinheritance papers as a reminder of who you really are. But if you ever try to spin another lie, I will make every single document I have public. As we stepped into the cold November air of Portland, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I'd been carrying since 2004. The fallout began within hours. By midnight, the live stream had been shared thousands of times. By Monday, Grant had resigned from the church and the Rotary Club. The Myers reputation, which took 50 years to build, was destroyed in exactly 5 minutes. Thanksgiving 2024. My dining table in Seattle seated 12. Skye was at my right, Eleanor Vance at my left. Maggie Sullivan was teaching my nephew how to fold napkins. Jax and Sloan were there, rebuilding the sibling bond we'd lost. My parents weren't there. Maybe they never would be. But looking around that table, I realized I'd spent 20 years mourning a family that never wanted me. Now, I was surrounded by a family I'd built myself. Skye stood to make a toast. To the family we build, she said, raising her glass of sparkling cider. Not the one we're born into. I looked out the kitchen window at the Seattle skyline. 20 years ago, I was a girl in the rain. Today, I was a woman in the light. That isn't a fairy tale ending. It's a real one. And real endings are the only ones that matter.